Always my favorite time of the year. We bring our good friend Duncan Stewart on from Deloitte. He's got his tech predictions for, I guess, 2021. Thanks for joining us, Duncan.
Thanks for having me, and happy prediction season.
Is 2021 going to be better? Because 2020 was a dumpster fire.
Could we set the bar slightly higher than that? Yes, I will make a bold prediction. 2021 will be better. So there we go. That one's out there and in the book.
I don't think you predicted the dumpster fire last year, though.
No.
So
nobody could.
Okay. So just before we get into some of these predictions, we're going to talk about what you see for cloud computing and 8K TV sets, 5G. Why does Deloitte come out with these every year?
Nothing better to do. No. It's a really important thing. Originally, we started doing this to advise our tech, media, telecom clients. Here's the big trends in your industry. But what we've seen in the last, especially 10 years, is that every industry cares what's coming next in tech. Every bank cares. Retailing. I don't care what happens online. Well, the ones who haven't gone bankrupt care an awful lot. And so what we now do is we do this every year, not so much for the tech, media, telecom industry, but for everybody else.
Let's jump into it. Let's start with cloud computing. I know it doesn't sound sexy, but you can make it sexy, right?
I can try.
Okay. What are you seeing for 2021?
Take a thing, now turn it upside down. So back in 2019, roughly 60% of all enterprise compute tasks were done on-prem, on the premises, with just over 40% done in the cloud. By 2021, that flips to 65 cloud, 35 on-prem. This is, to quote CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, we have seen 2 years of progress in 2 months as a result of the pandemic. Everybody's going to the cloud. People trust the cloud. They're moving faster than ever. It's I never would have thought I would have seen something like this in my life.
So for the listeners out there, I mean, they're always hearing cloud. So what is up in the cloud for business then?
So you see this webinar right now? That's cloud. This happens to be one called Zoom. There are lots of others out there. But the idea being that I don't need special hardware. I don't need special software. All of the cool filters and the processing and the thing that switches cameras depending on who is talking, all of that amazing stuff is now done by computers that are, in this case, for me at least, thousands of kilometers away. I can store a recording of this in the cloud and send it to people. I don't need to put a copy on my desktop and send them a very large file. I can just send a link. So it's storage, it's processing, it's artificial intelligence, it's connectivity. All of that is done in the cloud. The reason that's so good is that you can move fast, you can innovate rapidly, it lowers the cost, and it's the sort of thing that allows you to roll something out across a firm the size of Deloitte, hundreds of thousands of employees, literally in a week or two, rather than having to send people with dedicated hardware and equipment around to thousands of offices worldwide.
I guess to load all the programs and things. So I have a question here for you, Duncan. You said that all the processing is done in the cloud. Obviously, those are powerful computers up there. Will this affect hardware manufacturers on the local side, that are making the laptops and computers that we use in our homes and in our businesses? They don't need to be as powerful anymore, do they? At the extreme margins, you're right, except that the weird thing, of course, about the pandemic is that all of those people who wandered around saying, I don't really need a laptop anymore, I can do my entire job on my smartphone, have changed their mind since trying to work 12 hours a day from their home office. Ain't nobody in the world working 12 hours a day from a smartphone for their job. So at the same time that we have seen this boom in cloud, which is very real, we're also seeing probably the best year for computers since, I think it's at least since 2011, maybe even 2010. So they're not suffering. One of the interesting things from the pandemic is that we are seeing an acceleration in all kinds of technology. So don't weep for the PC manufacturers. They're doing fine. Let's move over to VR and AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, the headsets that put us in a whole different world and take us out of the grim one we're living in now. We keep
talking about this. Are we getting any further to more adoption of this type of technology?
Yes and no. So the no I'm going to start off with is the consumer. We have seen watching of video on demand like Netflix just explode as a result of the pandemic. We've seen gaming up. There are multiple cloud we talked about. We've seen multiple technologies just explode as a result of COVID-19. But VR, consumer VR, there's been almost no change. As a matter of fact, the major firm that forecasts sales of consumer VR and AR headsets cut their prediction growth rate, their annual growth rate, by more than half. This should have been VR's moment, and it wasn't, and that's bad at the consumer level. But where we are seeing it is in the enterprise and in education. If you can't teach a bunch of kids to weld in a real classroom as a result of the pandemic, do it virtually. It's safer, it's faster, and it's not as good, but it wasn't bad. So we saw significant acceleration of schools and companies training their employees using virtual reality headsets. We're predicting the use of VR and AR and mixed reality by enterprises and schools will more than double between 2019 and 2021. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Can schools afford this, though? I mean, these things aren't cheap.
They're not that bad. The price used to be super high. It's come down a lot. One of the nice things is you don't need a pair of goggles per person per year. It's not like a smartphone or a computer. Instead, think of it as a shared device. We know that from the enterprise. Walmart was able to train 1 million, not a typo, 1 million employees using only 17,000 headsets. The point being, not everybody used a headset at the same time. They each took their turn. It's more like an office printer or a projector. It's a shared device.
Talk about video doctor visits, which seem to be a big thing now. It wasn't before. It was starting to percolate. I liked the idea, but I never really did it. But everyone's doing it now.
Yeah, it was a really huge and growing thing, aside from the fact that patients didn't like it, doctors didn't like it, insurers wouldn't pay for it, and governments wouldn't allow it for privacy reasons. Not counting that, it was an enormous growth industry. We saw a whole bunch of changes all at once. Patients realized that if you can't see your doctor in person, you still got to see them. They were willing to try video. Doctors hate video, except you got to see patients somehow. And then at the government side, at the regulator and the insurance side, they both changed their mind. We saw a massive surge. So I've got like a data point here from Wechsler Health Institute in Columbus, Ohio. Famous, it's like a Mayo Clinic, but in Ohio kind of idea. Anyway, Wechsler published some data in the 4 weeks ending April 26th of 2020. 90% of their visits were telehealth, and of all visits, 70% were video. That was up from, let me check the numbers, 0% the year before. So if you want to kind of get your hands around how big was the growth, those are the numbers from one center. Is it going to stay at 70%? No, of course not. We're still going to go back to our doctors for a lot of the time. But our point is not that it stays at 70% or 7%. It's that it doesn't drop back to 0. Think of it as maybe 1 in 20 or about 5% of medical visits going forward could be done by video and will.
That's going to dramatically change that whole industry.
Well, it's only 5%. So it's really one of those things where if you got to go see a doctor about something that can't be done over the phone, that you're still going to do. Where I think it gets interesting is it removes that friction point, that one where you really don't know if you need to go to the doctor for sure. They don't need to see you in person. Imagine not having to get into a car and sit in a waiting room filled with 45 sneezing people for a half hour. I think it's one of those things that makes our life better. I'm not sure it transforms the industry. What it probably does transform is the industry for home health care monitoring. I want to know what your blood oxygen is. I want to know if you've got atrial fibrillation. I want to know your blood sugar levels. We see a large $35 billion a year market in gear that we can use at home to monitor our health, that we use in conjunction with video. There you go. Look at those. Was that an Apple Watch?
Yes.
The Apple
we have
Watch
no money left, but yes.
Yes, but the FDA, you've heard of the FDA. The FDA has approved the Apple Watch as a device for monitoring people who've been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. That is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's not just going to be the Apple Watch. There's lots of other devices out there, but that's a good example.
Yeah, I like it and I don't like it. Apparently, I'm not very healthy, but at least I know now. Let's talk hyper-quantification of sports, Duncan. And you've used examples of measuring puck and slap shot speeds, head impacts. Is this going to be a thing?
So this is pro sports. This is not yet going to trickle down to the average hockey player or average kid. At first, these things take time, right? But I want to make a couple of points. The first one is, technology in measuring sports is not new. Whether it was a stopwatch or the radar gun measuring that fastball, we've been quantifying sports for a while, but it's now getting super, super precise. It's about monitoring athletes 24/7, not just looking at how fast they're running on a field, but how is their breathing? How's their sleeping? What are their blood levels? That kind of stuff. Now, there's a few things that you pull out of this. One is hopefully your athletes do better, but the other one is the worst thing that can happen if you've just signed somebody to a $20 million deal is for them to get injured. Think about the hyper-quantification of sports at predicting or detecting early signs of injury and saving your star players. As a Canadian and as a Canadian parent, one of the things that jumps out at me is that helmet stuff. We worry about our kids, and pro teams worry about their athletes and concussion. If they had accelerometers inside helmets, they'd be much, you know that old phrase, wow, he really had his bell rung on that hit. How hard was that bell rung really? And being able to have hard scientific real-time evidence on that, that's going to be a big step forward for prolonging the careers of many athletes and making many parents feel better about their kids playing contact games like hockey.
Could that go down to a more darker level, like monitoring their behavior as well, like how much they're drinking and are they hanging out at bars because you're, geo-tracking them?
There are a number of complicated issues around privacy. Yes, in other words, yes, it could be. If you've got a big game tomorrow, you already are told by your coach there's a curfew and you got to be back by a certain time. Athletes are going to be nervous about having electronic spies on that. We're trying to focus on the happier side of the prediction, though.
Let's talk 8K TV sets. I think people are just getting used to 4K. Of course, the consumer electronic industry, especially the TV manufacturers, are just always looking for a new reason for us to upgrade. Do you think 8K TVs are going to be anything anytime soon?
So the answer to that is yes. So can I step back and ask a different question? I'm going to pretend I'm you. Okay. Duncan, does anybody in the world really need an 8K TV? No, nobody needs one. I
didn't need a 4K TV, but I have 3 now.
My exact point is nobody in the world needed a 4K TV either. To be honest, whether it's 4K or 8K, you really can't see much of a difference unless you actually press your nose up against the glass. In the real world, people don't really need an 8K or, for that matter, 4K. But 4K TVs will be more than half of all TVs sold in this year. People are going to buy 8K not because they need one, but because of a bunch of different reasons. One, they think they're future-proofing. Hey, if I've got an 8K, I don't need to worry about it whenever 8K rolls along. Number two, it's something you can brag about. Number three, it sounds better. 8K, twice as good as 4K. But you know what the single biggest reason is? If you want a really high-end set with all kinds of the smart features and the voice recognition and the high contrast, it's got 8K bundled inside. Now, it's going to be small this year, only about 0.5% of all TV sets, but that's $3.3 billion worth of 8K TV sets this year, and we predict that 5 to 6 to 7 years from now, half of all sets being sold will be 8K. This is the start of something big.
Can't afford more TVs. Okay, let's move on to 5G. It's here. We're seeing it rolled out in the major cities in Canada, around the world. It's for smartphone technology. It's for all sorts of connectivity that we're still exploring. But there's been a lot of, I guess, craziness around it. As far as the information, health risks. We see all this kind of stuff on Facebook. People want it banned because it's going to cause cancer or all sorts of other crazy things. What health risks are we looking at with 5G?
Absolutely none. I mean, there you go. You want the prediction in short? Absolutely none. 5G uses less power than 4G. If 4G didn't make you sick or give you coronavirus or whatever else, and it didn't, then 5G isn't going to either. 5G base stations use less power than 4G. 5G handsets use less power than 4G. 5G base stations shut off when they're not in use, meaning you're exposed to less power. 5G uses a thing called beamforming, so the radio waves are more focused and don't just spray everywhere. That's less radio energy. There's a whole bunch of reasons 5G will be safer than 4G. The reason we're making this prediction is it varies by country, but between 10 and 33% of people in the developed world are afraid of 5G. The reason we're making this prediction is we've really got to have a information campaign about why 5G isn't bad for you and why it's actually safer than 4G.
Why does this persist then, this false information?
It's unclear. It's certainly surprising the percentage of posts about the dangers of 5G that come from other countries, specifically certain other countries. This may be part of the same sort of disinformation campaign that is basically trying to weaken our societies. The same people who are worried about 5G are talking about things like vaccines and stuff like that. It appears to be a deliberate, perhaps, campaign to hit us where we're weakest.
You heard it from Duncan Stewart predicting that no one will find any health risks from 5G in 2021. Nothing proven. And as you said, there's even less power being used with these devices as well. Duncan, where can people find out more information about these predictions?
It's DeloittePredictions.com. You just look it up on the web. There's an entire report. My editors were asleep this year, and I'm afraid we've written 122 pages. So only download it if you're serious about it this year. I'm sorry. What's that old quote? I apologize for the length of these predictions. I didn't have time to make them shorter.
Thank you, Duncan. It's always a pleasure.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube page. And you know that little bell icon? Hit that and you'll be notified every time we post a new video. And comment. The more comments and the more likes and subscriptions we get, the more videos we can make.